He watched it burn. I never wanted to write about Jay again. Honestly, I tried to forget him, to forget the things he did. But somehow, when you witness something like that, it leaves a mark on you, a shadow that never quite fades. So here I am, telling the story again, maybe to purge it from my mind, maybe just because some things should never be buried. For anonymity's sake, I'll refer to him as Jay. I'm not sure why it matters anymore, but it's a habit I picked up after everything went down. Jay and I were the same age, and for a while, we lived in the same cramped apartment complex with our parents. His mother, my aunt, never said much about Jay's father. No one really knew who he was, or if they did, they weren't telling. But whoever he wasn't around. And maybe that's where it started. Maybe that absence planted something dark in Jay, something that twisted and coiled tighter as we got older. From the beginning, there was something wrong with him. I don't mean the usual kid being a brat wrong. I mean really wrong. He wasn't just mean or difficult, he was cruel. They had to give away their pets because Jay would hurt them. And the toys, he never played with them like other kids. He'd destroy them, break them apart, like he needed to see them in pieces. The other kids didn't want to play with him. Hell, I didn't want to play with him. But he was family, and sometimes, that meant you couldn't escape. He hated me. I'm not using that word lightly, he genuinely hated me. Maybe because I stood up to him. When he tried to get physical, I gave it back to him. I wasn't the scared little kid he expected me to be. And when he realized that, his violence turned to words, spitting venom instead of throwing punches. I remember one time, we were both 6 years old, sitting in the back of his mom's station wagon. He leaned close and told me he was going to open the door and throw me out while the car was speeding down the highway. I stared back and told him I'd do the same. The hatred in his eyes was too much for a 6-year-old to hold. He said he hated me, and I told him the truth, he was just angry because he couldn't hurt me the way he wanted to. Then came the day that shook everyone, but not in the way it should have. His mom called mine from the hospital. Jay had pushed his little sister down the stairs, and when asked why, he said he thought it was funny. He didn't just admit to it, he was disappointed she wasn't dead. He wanted more. His mother spanked him, he didn't flinch, didn't cry. So she dragged him to church, hoping that maybe prayer would reach where punishment couldn't. But Jay didn't change. And then there was that weekend, the one that should have been the last straw. His older sister, Dee, came to visit us. She was barely a teenager, but the weight of the world was already pressing down on her. She looked exhausted, worn thin, and her toe was wrapped in bandages. My mom, always concerned, asked what had happened. What Dee said still haunts me. Jay had knocked her toenail off. Not by accident, but with a clothing iron. He hit her foot so hard that the nail was completely gone. She showed us the wound, it was horrific. My mom talked to Jay's mom again, but what could she do? She was scared of her own son, afraid of the thing growing inside her boy, something beyond discipline or control. We stopped visiting as much after that. I think my mom knew we were in danger being around him, even if she never said it. But Dee kept coming over, desperate for a break, some escape from the nightmare her life had become. I could see it in her eyes, the way she was trapped in that house, sleeping with locked doors, trying to survive the nights. Then came the night of the fire. We were jolted awake by sirens and the thick, acrid scent of smoke seeping through the walls. Chaos broke out as people scrambled outside, fear twisting in the air. I remember running out, my heart pounding, and seeing the flames consuming their apartment. The fire raged like a beast, devouring everything in its path. And then I saw him. Jay, standing there, calmly watching the blaze, a bag of chips in hand. He wasn't screaming or crying. He wasn't even scared. He was fascinated. We found out later he'd started the fire himself, using one of his mom's lighters. And while his family was trapped inside, fighting to survive, he just stood there, watching it burn. The apartment complex kicked them out the next day. They had no choice but to move in with Jay's grandmother. His mom, bless her, tried to get him counseling, but she wasn't consistent. She was always working, always busy, leaving Dee and their little sister alone with him. It was only a matter of time before something worse happened. And it did. Years passed, and we lost contact with them. But the shadow of Jay lingered. And then, one day, we heard the news: he'd killed someone. The details were murky, but it didn't matter. He was in prison now, locked away where he belonged. I wasn't surprised. I'd seen the darkness in him as a child, the way it simmered and bubbled just beneath the surface, waiting for the right moment to explode. Jay's family doesn't talk to him anymore. They treat him like he never existed, like he was just a bad dream that eventually faded. But I remember. I'll always remember the boy who watched it burn.